The 911 call that came after the funeral. They folded the flag for him at the little brick church on Ellsworth Avenue, and the wind tried to take it twice before the honor guard's hands persuaded it to behave. It was a raw Thursday in late January in a river town in southeastern Ohio, the kind of cold that makes sound travel farther than sense. The man in the casket was Eamon Ridge, a volunteer firefighter and the sort of neighbor who shoveled 2 extra porches without mentioning it later. The service ended at 4, the last handshake landed at 4:20, and by nightfall, the street had gone back to being only a street. At 9:13, Leora Penn took her seat at the county dispatch console, slid on her headset, and watched the board come alive. At 9:31, the line marked 911 flashed with a familiar number. His number, the man everyone had just buried. Before we begin, tell me, where are you listening from and what time is it there? Leora had fielded storms and barn fires, and wrong turns called in as kidnappings. She had coaxed calm from people whose words came like hail on a tin roof. She had heard the first breath of a baby through a phone held in shaky hands, and the last breath of a stranger who needed someone to hear it. She was 34, kept her hair short to keep the headset from snagging, and wore a gray cardigan because the room ran cold to keep the computers honest. Her desk held 2 photographs wedged into the bezel of the monitor. One showed a river in summer, green as a promise. The other showed Eamon and his daughter Cass standing in front of the station engine with that look people get when duty gives them a reason to grin. The year was 2022. The county had upgraded the system, and the board pulsed with the soft light of new money that still felt like a borrowed suit. Lines identified towers and cross streets. Repeat callers had little tags. When Eamon's number flashed, it wore the tag she had put on it a year ago, Station 4. Her stomach made a small, foolish turn. Her hand did not. She tapped the line open. 911. What is your emergency? Static, not empty. The kind of static that carries weather in its mouth. A faint hiss like tires on wet asphalt far away, then a click as if someone had covered the microphone with a thumb and lifted it again. Leora glanced at the automatic location box. The system offered a circle that could have been a dozen blocks wide and no more. The tower showed the bluff above the river. The timer on the call rolled past 10 seconds, then 15. The headset warmed in her hand. "Hello," she said, voice even, the way training turns fear into architecture. "If you can speak, I am here." Something moved under the static. A breath, slow, disciplined. The way firefighters learn to breathe through a mask like they are rationing the ocean. She had listened to Eamon for years as he called in traffic stops and barn smokes and mutual aid requests in that unshowy voice he kept, even when the ceiling thought it was tired of being a ceiling. Her throat tightened without permission. The board did not care. It kept time. The night supervisor, Brandt, rolled his chair closer, not touching her cord. He was 50, part-time philosopher, full-time keeper of snack drawers. His eyebrows asked a question he did not give words to. Leora tapped a note onto the incident log with deliberate fingers. Caller number displays as decedent from earlier funeral. Open line. Faint audio. Possible misroute for memorial device. Possible spoof. Monitor. "Eamon," she said quietly, because sometimes names open doors the way keys do. "If you can hear me, give me any sound." The line breathed once more, then found a voice. Not bright, not ghostly, a man speaking like someone who had walked all day and only now remembered he could sit. It said one sentence, 3 words, patient, back door locked. Brandt's hand hovered over the radio mic. Leora nodded once. He paged Station 2 because Station 4 was morning, and Station 2 would show up with their coats half buttoned and their hearts arranged like a team. He sent them to the Ridge home on Quint Street, the small white place with a porch swing that had never let a guest feel foolish for needing to sway a minute. Leora kept her voice on the line. "Back door, locked," she repeated, writing it, hearing it, feeling the way the sentence wanted to be a map. "Is someone inside?" Nothing answered at first. Then a second sentence, softer. "Cass asleep. Brant's fingers were already moving the way piano players do when the song makes them want to be faster than they are. Officers on the midnight swing shifted their routes without complaint. The medic crew out of town angled their rig toward Quince in case Grief had found a trick that needed medical names. Leora sent a quick text to the on-call clergy liaison because the county did not believe in letting families be alone with what they could not name. Amen, she said, steady. We're sending them. Stay with me if you can. The line hissed like rain on a steel roof, and then went quiet. Not the click of a hang-up, the kind of quiet a room makes when a story finally sits down. The call timer rolled to 1 minute 23 seconds, then stopped. Disconnected, the board told her, cheerful as a toy that believes its work noble. Brant opened his mouth and then closed it. He reached for his coffee and decided it was the wrong kind of night for coffee and reached for water instead. Leora sat very still for a moment and felt the way adrenaline stands up in your body and refuses to sit until you give it a task. She gave it the task of listening. The lines danced with ordinary need. A possum in a kitchen. A husband who had cut his hand on a jar. A neighbor who had heard a window break and then realized it was the television. Her hands did their work. Her ear held a room for the line that had gone quiet. Officer G. Park radioed in first. Voice crisp. Tires crunching on salt in the street. Unit 3-1, Quince Street. Back porch light on. Back door indeed locked. Copy request to knock. Copy, Leora said, hearing her own voice make simple shapes. Proceed. There are knocks that sound like questions and knocks that sound like the start of a fight. Officer Park knocked like a person who has played in a string quartet. Firm, meticulous, willing to wait between knocks. Leora heard the long, thin silence on the open radio channel that means everyone has decided to breathe in sync. A porch swing creaked, whether from wind or memory. Then Park again, softer. Visual on subject in living room. Teen. Asleep on couch. Television on mute. No visible distress. We are making entry. Park called the locksmith number taped to his visor, because there is always one, and he also called the small cheat that officers inherit, which is to lift the back door on its tired hinges when you turn the key the wrong way. The door opened, a floorboard confessed itself. Park moved through a small kitchen that smelled like heat and spice and thyme. He said, quiet as a blessing, Cass, it's G, it's me. The girl woke with that rough sound grief makes when it has only just let go for half an hour at last. Back door, Park said into his shoulder mic. Locked, now secured. Subject breathing, oriented, tearful, says she fell asleep and forgot the back after the last aunt left. She says her dad would have said it. She says she heard him say it sometimes, even when he was alive, when she forgot. I'm locking up, then staying here until her aunt returns. The call had been the little bridge a county makes when one house cannot manage all its doors alone. Leora typed. She logged, she breathed. She answered a call about a siren that would not stop on a fire alarm panel, which is a call that can ruin a night or return it to its usable shape. She told Brant she needed 30 seconds, stood up from her console, walked to the stainless sink by the break room door, and washed her hands as if she had been in a kitchen that required respect. At 10:48, the line lit again. Same number. The board did not know how to feel about that and chose its usual indifference. Leora took it. 911. A voice lives inside a headset after a while. The nerves learn routes, the body decides where to keep the sound. The phrase came through low and clear. Basement. Pilot light. She did not hesitate. She sent the fire crew already on Quince next door. She told Park. She told the aunt, who had come breathless from her own house 3 blocks away, that they were going down the cellar stairs for the little square of flame that keeps a winter from doing more harm than good. She heard Cass in the background say, without fright, he always listened to the furnace like it was trying to tell him a joke. Engine 3 called in. Pilot light out. Gas smell minimal. Windows open. Relit. Carbon monoxide monitor registers safe. A firefighter Rowe, who had once done stand-up for exactly 2 open mic nights, and then decided his comedy belonged in the bay with his coworkers, added gently, Whoever called this in has good ears. The board calmed, the town kept its little noises, the river told the ice what to do, and the ice obeyed or not. Leora's shift slid past midnight. At 1:19, she poured tea she did not want and drank it because warm things are a kind of law. At 1:40, an old man reported a woman knocking on his side door asking for a light, and she sent Park and his partner again, and it turned out to be a neighbor who had locked herself out, and they laughed about solutions and did not mention grief, so it would not be tempted to take that house too. At 2:19, when the dispatch room feels like a lighthouse that forgot whether the bay is wide or just an eager creek, the line lit a third time. Leora did not say amen out loud. She let the humanities teacher voice in her head that once told her names have heft say it for her. 911. This time the sentence was longer. Not elaborate, not difficult. The kind of sentence men say when they've spent their lives making tool lists. Check the pan on the back burner. Leora's fingers moved before she could tell them to, and 10 seconds later, Park said on the radio that a pan of oil sat glowing on the stove, forgotten by a cousin who had come bearing food, and then wept, and then gone to call another cousin and set the phone down on the porch rail. Park killed the burner, slid the pan onto a cold eye, and said, "Tell whoever's on that line thank you again." She said, "I will," and understood how inadequate that was, and also how there is no better sentence at 2:20 in the morning when a house has been held upright by 2 extra words spoken by a man with no air left to push them. By dawn, the calls had slowed to their usual winter trickle. The board made its little satisfied beeps, the shift change crept near. Leora printed the overnight logs for the lieutenant in charge and set them in the bin with the neatness of a person who believes paper is a form of kindness. She took off her headset, set it on the hook, and let her neck decide it had been a stiff night. On her drive home, the river looked like a sheet of hammered tin under a sky that had not yet decided whether to blush. She stopped at the corner store for milk and oranges. The clerk rang her up and asked if she had been at the funeral, because everyone had been at the funeral, even if they had not parked their bodies in a pew. Leora said yes, and the clerk said he had known Eamon since they were boys, back when the river took 2 boys and gave back 1, and how the one who came back had never raised his voice again, unless it was to make a frightened kid laugh in a smoky basement. Leora listened. The clerk put 2 extra oranges in her bag, the way men do when they feel the night reach its hand into the room and cannot keep all the light from leaving. She slept until noon and then sat in her kitchen with the radio low and the blinds open to teach the afternoon how to behave. Her phone chimed with a message. It was Cass. Leora had given her number to the aunt without thinking, and nothing about this felt like a boundary violation now. The message was a picture of a backdoor lock and a caption. "He did it again, thank you." She replied, "You did it." He reminded, "That is a team." Cass sent back a heart in the color teens choose when they mean it and do not want to seem silly. Word traveled without gossip's teeth in it. People told each other the version they could bear. Some said the call after the funeral had been a trick of towers, an echo, a message scheduled by a grieving mind that had set a reminder on a phone. Some said Eamon was still doing his rounds, making sure pilot lights and pans behaved. The chaplain said he did not know the mechanics of it and did not care, that love gets to serve in whatever uniform it likes. The fire chief said quietly to Leora, "If my number ever lights your board and I am not in a position to help myself, send the crew. I will not be offended if you use my name to get them there faster." It is Wannon. The next week brought the kind of snow that erases the edges of things. Leora worked 3 overnights in a row and learned to sleep in squares of 4 hours like a cat. She took a call from a man who had found his wife on the floor and guided him to count and compress, and the medics arrived before the counting rasped the hope out of his voice. She took a call from a woman who had locked herself in a bathroom because her boyfriend had stopped being gentle, and she kept the woman talking about the photograph on the wall while the officers climbed the stairs 2 at a time. She did not think about the line until it lit again 2 Fridays later at 1 in the morning. She kept her voice clean. 911. Eamon's voice came again, thinner, like a person speaking through a scarf. It said, in a tone part instruction and part apology, box of matches in the junk drawer beside the oven. Throw them out. She told Park. Park went. He opened the drawer and found a box that had wicked itself damp and mean. He took it to the back porch and soaked it and binned it and then came inside and wrote a sticky note for Cass that read, "Your dad told on you." She woke to it and laughed in that shocked way laughter has when it has been given back its license to exist. Not every call was that kind. Once, the line connected, and all Leora could hear was faint wind and the hollow tick of a cooling engine, and she understood, without needing the lieutenant's later confirmation, that this had been the night the station bays opened, and Eamon's truck had been driven back from the long, slow procession, and the engine had clicked in that language. Machines use to admit fatigue. Once, the line carried only a sound, like boots on gravel, exactly 3 steps, then the pause of a man looking at a sky he used to know from a ladder truck. Once, nothing came at all. And still, she stayed on the line the way you stay on a porch after a friend has gone inside, just in case one more sentence needs to come out and walk around in the air. Spring loosened the river. April made the churchyard look less stern. Cass finished school with a concentration that made her teachers write small notes on the bottom of her papers. You have turned into a person who trusts herself. Leora saw her at the station on an open house Saturday, and the girl hugged her the way nieces do their aunts without asking for the right to be related. They stood under the engine bay's great door and listened to the way small kids treat sirens like musical instruments when given permission. Cass said she sometimes still heard it, the way a voice comes into a room without needing to open the door. She said the voice had told her to bring in the porch rug before a thunderstorm that would have flung it across the block. She said the voice had told her to drink water before her stomach had the language to beg for it. "What do you think it is?" she asked, not demanding that it be a ghost or an algorithm. "I think you live in a county where people answer one another when called," Leora said. "I think sometimes lines open from one room to another because the rooms were built that way by love. I think if we say it out loud too many times, the day will get shy and pretend it never happened. And I think your dad trained his whole body to go when someone needed a sentence, and I do not know what training looks like later. Thanks for watching Allen's To Help Pray." Cass nodded as if she had been offered advice about lifting with her legs, not her back. She put her hands on the engine's bumper like a kid checking the pulse of a whale and whispered thanks in the dull shine where she thought it might carry. The last call came in July, on a night that smelled like cut grass and the electric promise of storm. The board was quiet. Brant had his feet crossed at the ankle, the way he did only after midnight when the county behaved. The line lit. Leora took it with the care of a person accepting a candle in wind. 911. There was no static, no breath, only a single word, perfectly ordinary, soaked in a patience she would remember until the last hour of her life. Enough. Enough what? She asked, back straight, pencil ready. The word came again, a thought set gently on a table. Enough. Then a long exhale, the temperature of a day in which someone has put down a tool they are proud to have used and is ready to wash their hands. She typed the word. She did not send units. She did not mention it to Brant until the end of the hour, when she said it out loud the way you say a number twice to make sure you got it right. He nodded. He threw a cough drop to her like a baseball, and she caught it and laughed because bodies insist on living. There were no more calls after that. The system reassigned numbers as systems do. The board forgot how to glow with that tag. When Leora sat at her desk and the photographs leaned against the monitor made their steady witness, she still sometimes heard the faint tap of a firefighter's gloved hand on a doorframe, the universal signal for ready. She bought a small, heavy key hook for her own kitchen, put it by the back door, and never forgot again. She found that when she walked past the Ridge place on mornings when she needed to see the river before she could trust the day, she would look at the back door and feel not a haunting, not an ache, but the exact rectangular comfort of a thing that had been understood and done. If this kind of thing ever happens where you live, if a phone rings after a set of shoulders in town have lowered themselves to the work of grief, if a name appears on your console that your heart wants to call impossible, do what Leora did. Answer. Stand in the narrow bridge between rooms, ask short questions with soft edges, send help, write down exact words. The world is made of exact words and the work that follows them. Believe nobody and nothing too hard. Let the river decide what is memory and what is rumor. And when the voice finally says enough, let your hands say thank you by resting them, palm down, on the desk you have kept clean so the night can put its weight there for a minute. And if you are sitting in your kitchen with a back door that gets forgetful, say the date out loud to bring the day to heal. Late January 2022. Early April 2022. The hot night in July when rain forgot its manners. Say the town's name so it will remember it has one. Say Amen. Say Cass. Say Leora. Practice the sentence that saved a pan and a pilot light in a teenager who deserved a house that understood locks. Back door locked. Then lock it, then sleep. The county will keep its watch. The river will balance its own ledger. Somewhere, a dispatcher you will never meet will lay a pencil down on a pad with a line drawn through the last open box, a small, perfect check that means this part of the night is finished and the next part may begin. The babysitter's last text. Who's upstairs? The text came at 9:58 on a wet Friday in early November, the screen lighting the dim kitchen of a craftsman house on Maple Ridge Avenue in the town of Larkspur, Pennsylvania. The babysitter had written only 3 words, spaced as if she had to force her thumbs to move. Who's upstairs? Before we begin, tell me where are you listening from, and what time is it there? Her name was Ione Kestrel, a college sophomore who took evening jobs to pay for studio art supplies and a public transit pass to the city. She was a quiet soul with a quick wit, the kind of person who noticed the way rain made halos around streetlights and the way children's laughter changed when they grew tired. 2 kids slept under that roof that night, a 6-year-old boy named Briar and his 3-year-old sister named Lark. Their parents, Rowan and Maeve Harrow, had left at 7:15 for an anniversary dinner at a restaurant by the river. The year, if you need to understand the way phones hummed and doorbell cameras watched, was 2019. The house at 42 Maple Ridge was one of those old American stories, built in wood and memory, a deep porch with a swing that complained just enough to be charming, oak floors that spoke out loud when the humidity changed, crown molding thick as a picture frame. At the back, a narrow staircase rose from the mudroom to a short landing, and then up again into the second floor where the bedrooms sat in a row like well-behaved children. At the top of the main stairs, there was a crawl space door that had once led to a linen closet and now led to a barely insulated wedge of attic, hot in summer and sharp with cold in winter, the kind of door that makes a welcome thud when it closes, and an unwelcome thud when it doesn't. Before the Harrows left, they did all the small, loving rituals. Maeve set out a plate of sliced apples, a bowl of popcorn, and a note that read, "Help yourself to anything except the scotch." Rowan pointed to the thermostat and said the heat pumps kick on if the temperature dips. Fancy house, but the bones are stubborn. He smiled at Ione in the doorway, hair damp from the drizzle, denim jacket dotted with rain. Text us if the storm knocks the power out. Text us if the kids wake and ask for the song about the lighthouse. Text us even if you think it'll make us look overprotective. It won't. At 7:30, the children were bathed, pajamaed, and nestled into beds that smelled faintly of line-dried sheets. Ione read the lighthouse song twice, and the little girl fell asleep with a hand on the brother's shoulder, a tether strong enough to hold a moon in place. At 8, the dishwasher hummed its modest lullaby. At 8:20, the rain came harder, dropping like a handful of pebbles thrown by a polite intruder. At 8:42, the doorbell camera pinged, announcing a raccoon with ambitions. Ione's phone ticked with messages from a group chat, small bursts of jokes and memes. She answered 2 and then set the phone face down, because she had promised herself she would be the kind of sitter who watched and listened. She put a kettle on. She chose a mug with a hairline crack because hairline cracks reminded her of river maps. She stood at the back window and watched the alley, where a single streetlight blew a cone of yellow onto the wet blacktop like a candle someone had forgotten to snuff. At 9:21, a floorboard spoke upstairs. It was not the sound of a child rolling over and not the polite pop of wood releasing humidity. It was a stepped-on sound, slow and weight-bearing, forward and then a tiny, deliberate back. Ione took one breath, then another. The kettle clicked off. The house returned to its normal choir. She checked the baby monitor screen. Two small forms slept. The greenish night vision painting dreams onto their faces. She told herself she knew old houses. She told herself wind can make timber say things it doesn't mean. At 9:36, the sound came again, above the kitchen this time, in the hallway between the children's rooms. One step and another. A long pause. Then the faintest scrape, as if someone had scuffed a shoe and then, embarrassed by the sound, tried to rub it out with the sole. The kind of scrape that turns the air thin. Ione lifted the house phone from its cradle because old houses carry old phones like relics. No dial tone because this was 2019 and the landline was a costume. She put it back and picked up her cell. No missed call, no alert from the doorbell camera. She opened the parent's contact, hovered, did not press. First, she would look, she would be careful. She would not give Rowan and Maeve a reason to race home on wet roads unless there was a reason. She climbed the back stairs because they felt less like a stage. Each step was shallow and careful. The rain softened to a hiss. Her breath became a guest she had to host with manners. At the landing, the air grew cooler. She could see down the short hall into the little boy's room, the lighthouse nightlight casting a steerable arc of white. She could see the girl's room door nearly closed, just enough to make a crescent, the way some children like it. She could also see the crawlspace door at the top of the main stairs. It was closed, latch turned. That mattered more than it should have. She waited. Sometimes the house wants to know if you have patience. Sometimes it will reward you with silence. Sometimes it will not. There was a third sound, not a footfall this time, but a breath. Not hers. Not a child's soft, open-mouth exhale, but the kind of breath that pauses at the end like it is tasting the air. It came from the darkness beyond the crawlspace door, except the door was shut. Ione felt the tiny hairs along her forearms confess themselves to fear. She stepped into the boy's room. He slept with his mouth open just a little, lower lip shiny. Good. She stepped to the girl's room. Little Lark had turned onto her stomach, stuffed rabbit tucked under her chin. Good. When Ione moved back into the hall, her eyes caught something at the far end where the light thinned. A strand of damp hair lay across the floorboards, faint as a pencil mark, a single narrow ribbon that did not belong to either child. It glistened. She knelt without thinking and picked it up. Cold. Clean. Long enough to belong to someone grown. She stood up too quickly and steadied herself with a hand on the wall. Her palm pressed into a nail head that had been painted over and sanded down so smooth it felt like a coin. She thought the oddest thought then. If I press that nail in, will the crawlspace door open by itself? She smiled at herself because fear makes even introverts dramatic in their own skulls. She returned to the back stairs, slow and exact, and only when she reached the fourth step from the bottom did she glance at her phone. The time read 9:58. The text she sent herself, as if letting the words exist outside her head could make them smaller, was only 3 words. Who's upstairs? She meant to send it to Rowan. She meant to send it to Maeve. She meant the message as a half-joke with a serious underlayer. But the thumb that had learned to move fast learned the wrong dance. It went to her friend in the group chat, and by the time she realized, the message had already become a tiny flare in half a dozen pockets around town. Her friend replied with, "What are you doing?" and also joking, right? And also put them on speaker. Ione did not reply. She set the phone on the counter face up this time. She took the largest knife from the drawer and then immediately put it back because knives are not courage and courage is not noise. She chose instead a heavy flashlight from the mudroom shelf, the kind that doubles as a hammer. She clicked it on. The beam carved a clean white tunnel along the baseboards. She moved to the bottom of the main staircase now, because if fear wants you to circle, wisdom wants you to cross. The newel post was worn as a handshake. Family photographs climbed the wall. A wedding photograph near the bottom showed Rowan in a blue suit and Maeve in a dress with sleeves that looked like light. Higher up, a picture of Briar in a lion costume, nap-flattened mane, grinning with the sincerity only a 6-year-old can manage. Above that, near the top, a framed landscape. The glass reflected the flashlight beam like a lid. Halfway up, she paused. There was that breath again. Not a cough, not a snore. A breath like someone who had been holding still too long and had to remind their body to keep doing the automatic things. The sound came from beyond the last step, in the shadow to the left, where the crawlspace door Saturday. It was closed, latch turned. She aimed the beam at the brass. The metal showed a fog that had not been there a minute ago, condensation, from a mouth that had exhaled near it. She kept her own mouth shut because you cannot take breath back once it is out. The latch moved. It moved too gently to be gravity. It made the tiniest metal-on-metal sigh. Then it stilled, as if the person behind the door had realized they had announced themselves and decided to pretend nothing had happened at all. Ione's voice, when it came, was not loud. It was firm in the way a music teacher's voice is firm when she asks a child to stop tapping the desk with a pencil. I'm a babysitter. The police are on their way. If you are a neighbor who has made a mistake, this is your chance to leave without me seeing your face. If you are not a neighbor, this is your chance to decide to be one. Nothing moved, but the house did a small thing then. It clicked. A sound traveled through the baseboards from kitchen to parlor like a cricket chirp. The refrigerator compressor had kicked on. The world had not narrowed to only this door. She stepped higher. She brought the beam closer to the latch. She did not touch it. She watched a drop of moisture on the brass slide very slowly toward the handle and then stop, held by a force that did not want to be named. From the children's rooms, nothing. From outside, rain. From down the hall, a draft like someone had opened a mouth to speak and then decided not to. She took the phone, thumb shaking now not from drama, but from the body's strange understanding of scales. She typed 911 and the call went through on the first chime. The dispatcher answered with a first name and a county. Ione told that calm voice her name, the address, the fact of 2 sleeping children, the fact of a locked door with breath behind it that did not belong to the family. The voice said, officers are on the way. The voice said, stay on the line. The voice said, do not open the door. So she did not. She watched it the way you watch a stage when you know the performer is already in the wings. She told the dispatcher every small thing she saw. The latch is fogged. The brass is pitted near the screw head. The paint around the jamb is chipped the way it chips when someone tries to open a door with a butter knife. The dispatcher asked about the kids, and she told her about the lighthouse song because sometimes the answer to a safety question is a story that proves you are paying attention. It took 6 minutes for the first cruiser to roll into the alley, though those 6 minutes ran long like string you cannot find the end of. 2 officers climbed the porch steps, rang the bell softly out of habit, then tried the knob and announced themselves. Ione walked down the main stairs, not taking her eyes from the crawlspace door, unlatched the front door, and stepped back quickly so the officers could enter. Their names were Officer Tamsin Dupre and Officer Hal Moran. They were young enough to still wear the job like a coat borrowed from a bigger relative, and old enough to know when to keep their weapons holstered because children were sleeping. Ione pointed. The hall was framed now by their bodies and the yellow hallway light and the cleaner light of the flashlight. Officer Dupre nodded, raised a hand to let silence accumulate, and then approached the door with a slowness that reminded Ione of a conductor raising a baton before the first downbeat. Dupre put 2 fingers lightly on the latch and did not move it. She bent, eye to the thin seam between door and jamb. She inhaled. She did not exhale for a count of 3. Then she did, a controlled tide. She mouthed one word to Moran. There. Moran moved with that cop-slow speed that reads as kindness until it becomes a tackle. He positioned himself on the knob side. Dupre took the hinge side. They counted without sound. Moran turned the knob and pulled. The door did not open. Dupre drove her shoulder low into the panel, and the old wood decided to be new and gave with a crack that sounded like an ankle breaking far away. The space beyond was small, angled, cluttered, with things families save because they carry stories in them. A fan with no blade, a suitcase with travel stickers that meant Paris had existed once for someone in this house. 3 plastic bins of children's clothes marked in black marker, a broken chair that had not given up, and a person, folded into the angle between floor and pitch, knees under chin, face turned away from the light, hands empty and ready to lie about it. Dupre said, "Do not move." Moran said, "Show me your hands." The person did not show their hands. They lifted their left shoulder like someone about to stand in a narrow coffin, and then realized there was no way to both stand and not be seen. They kept their face turned. A smell came from the small hot space that was not attic smell. It was sweat and wool and rain and a cologne Ione could not name but would recognize for years in crowds and feel a short-lived lightning in her spine. The person finally shifted enough for the light to catch their cheekbone. Smooth, young, the jawline of someone who still believes they can sneak back to the version of themselves that did not make this choice. Dupree reached. The person flinched, then stilled. Moran took the wrists, quick. Plastic cuffs clicked, and Saturday. The person whispered one word so fast and so quiet, it sounded like a sound and not a word. Please. There are nights when a house rearranges what you know about it. There are nights when law and luck arrive at the same time and dress alike so you cannot tell who deserves the thank you. There are nights when children sleep through the loudest noises and wake to the softest ones. Breyer woke when Officer Dupre gently asked Ione if the boy had a favorite song she could sing while they stepped this stranger past his doorway and into a world that would be, for the stranger, smaller and heavier. Ione sang the lighthouse song, the boy rolled over, the girl sniffed twice and then reclaimed her rabbit. The name given at the kitchen table later, with the cuffs off and the hands folded around a paper cup of tap water, was Corin Vale. He was 22, a barback at a music venue downtown, a part-time mover for a storage company on the edge of town, a person whose landlord had changed the lock that very afternoon because rent was late again, and who had wandered past the Harrows house just after 9, watching rain stencil shadows on the porch. He said the front porch light was off, that the back alley light was the kind that made him nervous because it buzzed. He said he had once done a job in this very house, moving boxes after Maeve's mother passed, that he knew the crawlspace door did not always latch if you pushed too hard. He said all this in a way that sounded like memorized lines. Officer Moran left for a minute and returned with a small bag-tagged chain of custody. Inside, a multi-tool with a narrow flathead blade that would fit under a painted jam and lever it without much damage, a pair of cheap cotton gloves, damp, a folded postcard someone had intended to mail, featuring a lighthouse on the coast of Maine and a note written in pencil that read, "We are well, love you, see you in December." The postcard had not been addressed yet. Corin looked at the lighthouse as if it had insulted him. "Why?" Officer Dupre asked. "Are you in a crawl space with a multi-tool?" Corin said he wanted to get out of the rain. He said he saw the back door wasn't fully latched. He said he knocked and no one answered. He said he stepped inside to be out of the weather. He said he heard children and then realized he had made a mistake and was trying to hide until he could unmake it. He said he had not gone near the bedrooms. He said he had not taken anything. He said most lies are just a breath away from the truth if you hold the breath long enough. The doorbell camera proved he had never rung. The back door, which Ione had locked after the raccoon, had not been forced, which meant the multi-tool had met the strike plate and learned a new way to talk. The thin condensation on the latch proved his face had been inches from the brass, as if he were listening through metal to weigh his chances. The damp hair on the hallway floor did not match Ione or the children. It matched Corin. The officers did not say poetry out loud, but sometimes evidence makes a poem whether or not you want it. Rowan and Maeve arrived at 10:28, windblown and wet, faces open with fear, and then with the specific relief parents make when they count the number of children and find the number unchanged. Maeve thanked Ione, then thanked Officer Dupre, then thanked the kettle for existing because it gave her hands something to do. Rowan walked to the base of the main stairs and looked up at the crawlspace door and put his hand on the newel post like a man greeting an old friend and apologized under his breath to the house for not knowing it needed him tonight. The rain slowed. The streetlight outside defined every leaf as if auditioning them for a brighter job. Corin Vale sat at the kitchen table and looked smaller and then larger and then smaller again, the way a person does when they realize they have chosen a story they cannot revise. He asked for a lawyer then, as was his right, and the night shifted into a new shape with paperwork and phone calls and the sound of zippers on evidence bags. Later, after the officers had gone and the house had been put back in order with all the rituals humans use to convince themselves the world is knowable, Rowan stood on the porch and stared at the street. A car hissed by, tires whispering on wet asphalt. Somewhere, a train declared itself. He turned when Ione stepped onto the porch with 2 mugs of chamomile tea and the brittle, beautiful calm people make after the danger has taken its hands off their shoulders. He said thank you a dozen ways that did not use the word thank. She said, of course, a dozen ways. That meant I am shaking on the inside, but I am still here. Maeve joined them, the porch light warming the edges of her hair, and the three of them stood in a small triangle like a warning sign no one else would read. When Maeve spoke, her voice had a new floor under it. We will change the locks. We will reinforce that door. We will move the postcard basket. We will install a sensor that turns on a light at the slightest motion. We will do the things that let us sleep. Ione nodded and did not say that sleep would come with its own sounds now. The sound of a breath behind a door. The sound of a latch fogging. The sound of a floorboard speaking the truth. There is a detail the police report will not mention because police reports must make simple lines out of crooked nights. At 9:59, after sending the text to the wrong chat and before calling emergency services, Ione leaned her forehead against the cool plaster of the stairwell for the space of 1 heartbeat. She whispered something that was not quite a prayer and not quite a promise. Okay, if someone is up there, I will not be the person who opens the door and invites them in. I will be the person who names the danger out loud. Sometimes that is the whole difference. Not bravery that charges, but the steadiness that refuses to be tricked into being polite to danger. The next morning, the November sky tried on a bland blue and liked it. The town of Larkspur went back to the work of a Saturday. Kids in hoodies kicked at leaf piles. The bakery line wrapped twice around the counter. A woman in a gray coat standing by the river thought the water sounded like someone ripping silk very slowly and wondered who she would tell that to. Ione slept past noon and woke to a peanut butter text from Maeve, which read in that shaky grammar of gratitude, "Come by for dinner anytime. And also, I found your denim jacket on the porch swing. And also, there will be pie tonight if you want pie." She smiled and answered with too many thank yous and 1 yes to pie. She showered longer than she needed to, stood still in the water in a way that made time into a warm curtain, then dressed in gently clean clothes that smelled like detergent and a future. When she stepped outside, the air had that crisp, crisp edge. That means the first hard frost has already visited and left behind a postcard of itself on every windshield. Maple Ridge Avenue looked like an old movie taught to speak color. She walked past houses that had their curtains open a little wider than usual, past neighbors who held eye contact just a second longer, the way people do when the story has almost become a myth and they want to remind themselves it is still shaped like a person. On the Harrow's porch, there were new screws in the latch. The crawlspace door upstairs had a length of wood screwed diagonally across it like a stern eyebrow. A small motion sensor had been installed in the hall. It blinked a polite green and then went to sleep. The kids were in socks, sliding across the floor, laughing the laugh that children make the morning after a storm when the yard is new again. Rowan handed Ione a slice of apple pie on a paper plate and said again what he had said the night before, but with the daylight, making his voice warmer. You kept your head, you called, you stayed steady. That is the whole job sometimes. We will tell people that part when we tell them the story. Not who he was, not what he said, not the smell. We will tell them you named the danger and didn't let it decide your speed. The town told the story in its own ways. The newspaper, which had been saved from extinction by a stubborn editor named Lita Quinn, wrote a piece with the careful headline, "Babysitter's Quick Thinking Leads to Arrest in Overnight Burglary Attempt." The group chat learned, gently from Ione herself, that sometimes jokes congeal into myths, and myths can be mean. At the music venue, a bartender wiped the length of the bar 3 times, then once more, then stopped. At the storage company, a supervisor stared at a stack of moving blankets and tried to add up what the numbers meant about people. There is not a moral here, sharp and so clean it can cut bread. There is not an ending where everyone claps and the house resumes being only a house. There remains a door with a new diagonal board and screws that will loosen over time and be tightened again. There remains a boy who will ask, on a night 2 weeks later, when rain drums the gutter, can you sing the lighthouse song one more time? And a girl who will say, not the part where the foghorn sounds, that part sounds like a giant in the crawl space. There remains a young man named Corin, whose first court date will arrive with a sky the exact color of the alley light, and who will have to decide whether to say the word sorry to the ceiling or to the faces in the room. At 9:58 on some future night, a phone will light in some other kitchen in some other town, and a person will type 3 words spaced out as if their thumbs had to be convinced. Who's upstairs? If you are that person, hear this story as a map of breath. Name the danger, make the call, keep your voice exactly as loud as it needs to be and no louder. Stand where you can see doors and hallways. Carry light. Remember that a latch that fogs is a sentence the house is trying to say. Let the sentence finish. If you are listening from a city, may the traffic outside be ordinary and honest. If you are listening from a farmhouse that knows every creek by its first name, may the wind be the only guest tonight. If you are listening in a small apartment where the neighbor's footsteps already live in your ceiling, may you learn the grammar of each tread so well that the first strange syllable tells you exactly what to do. The babysitter's last text was a question pointed upstairs, but the real end of the story is how she answered all the other questions pointed at her. Will you panic? Will you try to be polite when the moment calls for clear? Will you open a door because silence asked sweetly? She chose no, no, and no. She chose the shape of a steady voice on a thin line. She chose to be the reason the house could go back to being only wood and memory. Some nights, when she passes the Harrows by chance and the porch swing is still, she hears only the rain and the river, and that is enough. Some nights, she hears the old door upstairs settle as the heat kicks on and thinks, with a small smile, that even a house can be taught to breathe more quietly. And on the better nights, every window along Maple Ridge holds a square of light cut, perfect as a fresh slice of pie, and the street keeps its watch, and the children sleep so deep the world could rewrite its rules, and they would wake to the new rules fresh and ready to be memorized. If that happens where you are, tell me when. Tell me what the air smells like. Tell me the hour, spoken slowly so the world cannot run away with it. Tell me if the latch on your upstairs door is dry and dull or a little fogged from someone's breath. Tell me if you are holding a mug with a hairline crack that looks like a river map. Tell me if the house has taught you any of its words. And if your phone lights at 9:58 and the message reads as simple and terrible as a knock, remember the kitchen in Larkspur and the steady girl in the denim jacket, and say out loud to no one and to everyone, not tonight, not on my watch, not in this house. The 911 call that kept connecting after the funeral. They buried the phone with him because his mother asked them to. It had been his tool and his diary, the way people keep their whole lives in their pocket now. And in the week between the collision and the service, she said quietly at the kitchen table that she wanted him to have it. The funeral was on a brisk Thursday in late March in a small town along the Skagit River in Washington state, the kind of day that smells like thawed earth and rain on cedar. 2 days later, at 2:18 in the morning, the county's emergency line lit up with his number, and the call connected as cleanly as if he were standing outside the dispatch center with a brand new signal. Before we begin, tell me, where are you listening from, and what time is it there? Keely March was the dispatcher on the board that night. 36. A decade of night shifts wrapped around her bones like a habit she didn't try to quit. She knew the sound of every ringtone the county used, and 3 it no longer trusted. She had trained herself to keep breath, even if a voice said, there is a gun, or the faraway way people say, I think I'm dying. She kept a knitted cardigan on the back of her chair and 2 photos on the shelf above the console. Her mother standing in front of Diablo Lake with her hair trying to fly away, and a Polaroid of a skinny boy with a chipped front tooth and a smile that looked like a dare. The boy was her younger brother, Finn, 28 in the photo. forever 28 by the time the town paper ran his name above the fold. The collision had been a week before spring turned a corner. Late at a four-way stop out by the county line, an empty log truck rolling too fast through a fog that made taillights smear into red ribbons. Finn drove a dented Civic with a cracked dashboard and an air freshener shaped like a salmon that had long since given up its scent. He worked night stocking feed at the co-op and mornings on his old guitar, composing pieces called things like Wet Pavement and The First Chanterelle. When the deputy knocked on Keeley's door just after dawn that Friday, the word sister felt like a ladder that someone had kicked away. They buried him with the phone on a Tuesday afternoon because the ground needed a day after the last hard freeze. Keeley held the thing in her palm before they closed the lid. Old, black, the screen spidered, and the case pocked with drops of white paint from the time they redid the kitchen. She turned it face down, as if giving it privacy inside that last small room, and she did not cry in that second. She saved the crying for the night in her car outside the Safeway lot when the radio played a song he used to send her links to, saying, "Listen to the way the kick drum makes the air behave." So when the board flashed with his number at 2:18 in the morning, when the screen read Finn March Mobile, when the console showed the tower on the hill by bird's view, grabbing his call like a father grabs a child's hand crossing a street, there was a half second where Keeley didn't breathe at all. Then she did exactly what training says. She pressed the line open, put her voice in the place it knows, and said calmly, 911, what is your emergency? Silence, which is not always empty. The air bedded itself in her ear. She heard distance, a kind of wet rush the river makes when it is thinking about snowmelt. Under that, a click like someone setting a mug on tile. Her eyes went to the automatic location information and found nothing helpful. The software threw up a circle that could have been half the county. The handset beeped as if someone on the other end had put a thumb over the microphone and removed it. Then a sound arrived that she did not mistake, a short, soft, breathy laugh. The exact one a brother makes when he cannot help but find something funny, even in a room where the air belongs to grief. Keeley's free hand had already found the little rosary of buttons around enter that she wore down with steady use. Her thumb wanted the panic of someone else. She kept it from that. She tried again. Can you talk to me? If you can't talk, tap once for yes, twice for no. If you are hurt, I need you to stay on the line. We are here with you. A small sound like wind through fur limbs rode the connection, then static, thin as a hair. The call timer hit 19 seconds, 21, 27. She probed the network with a key command. The number at the top of the screen did not lie, it was his. She sent a ping. The triangle on her map twitched half an inch and then flattened, embarrassed to have moved. The night supervisor, a stout woman named MrBall, who kept cough drops in a coffee mug painted with trout, wheeled her chair closer without rolling over Keeley's headset cord. You good. It's his, Keeley said, and felt foolish because the board already told them both. She tapped a line into the event note, caller number displays as deceased subject. Open line, faint audio, possible misdeal from unknown handset, possible pocket dial from transferred number. Because the systems need this kind of vocabulary, even when the body wants to type a prayer. The line stayed. The river sound rose and fell with the patience of a thing that had been working since the first melt in these hills. Twice, the click. At 42 seconds, a voice so faint that her headphones might have invented it if she hadn't known the exact way it shaped vowels. A whisper before the word, the way he did when he wanted to speak quietly but his breath didn't know the trick yet. Key, he said. Then static erased whatever came next. She did what you do. You keep the line alive and you start the search without pretending you can command the search's heart. She thumbed a hot button that rang the on-call deputy cruising past Lyman. She opened the text box to the Fire District volunteers and wrote a plain message. Open line 911 from cell belonging to Finn March. Please stage at South Skagit Highway and mile marker 12. Listen for any audible cues. She sent it. She kept her voice in that pocket where calm is a bridge other people can cross. If you can hear me, Finn, give me anything, tap, breath, song, whatever you want. I'm here. I've got you. At 1 minute and 9 seconds, the line disconnected itself with the flat little goodbye that handsets make when they are tired of holding grief. Maribel squeezed Keely's shoulder. Not hard, just where the muscle under the blade flinches when you ask it to admit it's a muscle. Phones glitch, she said. The way you say a thing because you care about the person you are saying it to, not because the sentence is enough. It might be a number that got reassigned too fast. Or a voicemail we don't understand, or the system hiccuping. Eat your granola bar, drink your water. Keely nodded. She typed. She called the carrier and reached a support tech whose voice was young and far away and trying very hard to be the right kind of helpful. He put her on hold while he consulted screens and a script. He came back with words that felt like pebbles. The phone was deactivated the day after the funeral. The SIM wasn't live. The number was in a 30-day limbo before being returned to the pool. No activity on the account, no pings, no nothings. He suggested, gently, that older consoles misreport. She thanked him with the flat politeness you give a person who has done their job thoroughly and still left you in the same room. At 3:31, the line lit again. Same number, same tower, same ring that used to show up when he called from outside the co-op in the rain. She connected. This time, the wind sound was larger, the way a body learns to be a room for weather. She said his name. She said her name, because sometimes that helps even with the living. The whisper arrived again, under a breath that made her think of the cold. Key, he said. Key. What key? Love. Tell me where you are. She could hear Maribel pinging the deputy, already turning him around toward the bridge at Minkler. She messaged the volunteer fire chief, a man named Boone, with a mustache that looked like the map of a meandering creek, and he replied with a thumbs up and the single word rolling, because that is how nights with radios and riverbanks work. The whisper came a third time. Key, box. Then the line shook itself off like a dog and was gone. At dawn, she drove home the long way, because the short way had too many pieces of memory stuck to it. She slept hard for 90 minutes and woke with the imprint of her headset still on her left ear. She showered and went to her mother's, sat at the table with the fruit bowl and the envelope full of sympathy cards that needed more than thanks in reply. She kept the thing she needed to say in her teeth while her mother talked about potato salad and what to do with the clothes in his room. Then she let it out. Simple. His number called, last night, twice. I answered. Her mother's hand did that small pat-pat that says, I hear the pain, but I do not believe the sentence. It's grief, she whispered. It changes the way machines sound. Keely nodded, because there was nothing else to do with that sentence but nod back and put it in a pocket for later. That night, Keely traded shifts so she could be back on at midnight, the board under her hands like a piano that belonged to the county. At 2:16, she said quietly to the room with no one in it but her, don't. And at 2:18, the line lit anyway. The event timer clicked into its 1 to 2 rhythm. She opened the call. The whisper came faster. Key, box, tread. She wrote the words down in block letters out of a reflex that felt like morality. She pushed her chair back an inch. Tread, she said, like stairs, like a step. A new sound crept in around the edge of the river. A hollow drum, regular, light. Keely closed her eyes. She knew that sound. Years of middle-of-the-night responses to houses with basements and water where it didn't belong. Sump pump, she said out loud, not to the caller, not to the room, just to the fact of sound. She typed, sump, pump, hum. Then another word arrived under the hum, not from the line, but from inside her own head, wearing the voice of the skinny boy in the Polaroid. Take the old key from the coffee can, sis, the one with the brass coin stuck to it. Box under the stair, third tread up, like we did when the lights went out in storms. She stood before she meant to. Maribel watched her, didn't stop her. Keely put the call on a hold that wasn't a hold and told Boone to swing a truck by her mother's house. She called her mother from the desk that sees everything. Don't be afraid, she said. I'm sending the volunteers to check the basement. Just wait for them. Don't go down alone. Her mother didn't ask why, which is one thing grief teaches. People you love get to make requests without explanation for a while. Boone's rig rolled up with its lights quiet. The volunteers went headfirst into that smell. Every Northwest basement owns bleach and wet, and the memory of potatoes stored during years when the family didn't trust the store. Keely stayed on the line with the open nothing, her voice splinted into calm by a profession that forbids hysteria. The pump clicked. The whisper breathed once more and said a word she wasn't ready for. Sorry. Then, softly, don't be mad. Boone's voice arrived on the radio like a chair scraping back. Found it, he said, under the third tread. You want me to read you the note, or you want me to bring it to you? Read, she said, because whatever was going to happen to her lungs if she waited wasn't worth the poetry of paper in hand. Boone read slow, the way you read a recipe from a grandmother's hand. It's written on the back of a co-op receipt. It says, key tape to this in case. Safe deposit at Skagit State. There's a note inside for Key. Don't tell Mom what bank it is because she'll go without you. Tell her to wait. Also, okay, sorry about the dent in your bumper. That last part's got a smile face drawn like a potato. Something in Keely that had been standing on one leg for a week put its foot down. She let out a laugh that wasn't a laugh and wasn't anything else her mother would have recognized over the old landline if she'd been listening. She wrote the words down because the act made them legally alive. The line in her ear hissed a little, as if pleased. Then it went quiet. Morning brought a restless sun and the sort of legal tasks people think the dead should have trained us for. She drove her mother to the bank with the safe deposit vault and the ancient pen on a chain. She presented the letter that the funeral director had told her to keep in her purse. They signed a paper. They went into the room with the little booths. The banker slid the box out and put it down like a ceremony. Inside was a small green notebook with his handwriting, which had always leaned like a boy sitting cross-legged on a sidewalk. For Keely, it said on the first page. Next to it, a business envelope with her mother's name. There was a key on a ring shaped like a mountain that belonged to the old Subaru they used to share, and a folded paper that turned out to be a draft of a song he would never record because the bridge wouldn't come no matter how he tricked it. There was also a receipt for a storage unit in town that she'd asked him about once, and he'd shrugged and said tools while his eyes looked at a point behind her shoulder. He had written her a letter that began with two jokes whose laughter had expired, and then got to the part that made her lever open a whole new drawer in herself. I know you'll be the one who makes sense of this stuff if anything happens, he wrote. I know I'm not supposed to say if anything happens like I can see it, but I think about it when I'm out by mile 12 in fog and the log trucks don't think they need me to exist. He told her where to find things and how to say certain facts to their mother in a sequence that would hurt less. He wrote a sentence that came from the middle of his lungs. Don't carry what isn't yours. He signed his name so fast, the last letter looked like a dog's tail. She held the little book while her mother read her envelope. Her mother's face did a new thing, an arrangement Keely hadn't known it could do. She realized, not for the first time, that grief makes a gallery of your expressions, and you have to decide which ones are worth hanging. That night, Keely took herself off the schedule, even though the county hates it when you do that with no notice. She made tea the way their grandmother did, steeped until the spoon stood up if you let it. She sat at the kitchen table with Finn's notebook and a pencil for the words she needed to lay next to his. She wrote the dates like you have to say them out loud, late March, 2021, because numbers felt like bad company. She made a list because doing is a language the body trusts. At 2:18, the phone on the wall rang, the old landline they had kept for storms because cell service sulks here when the rain gets personal. She lifted it with the same hand she used to place IVs when she thought she'd be a nurse. She said hello the way you say hello into a hotel room when you think someone might be in the shower, polite and ready to apologize. Open line, said the part of her that had trained for too long to rest, but it wasn't the emergency board. It was her mother's cousin from Bellingham, voice carrying prayer under its vowels. Keely felt the absurd laugh again and let it go this time. Not tonight, she thought to the air where a river sometimes lived. The calls went quiet for 3 nights after that. She dreamed the sump pump clonked in a steady heartbeat and that the water rose anyway, inching up the metal pole of the washer like it had a plan. She woke with her mouth dry and her eyes open, the way a serviceable person wakes when she has decided she will not let the day surprise her anymore. On the 4th night, the board lit at 1:10, not 2:18. Same number, same tower, same little pang like someone pulling 3 hairs from the back of her neck in the exact way a brother does when he wants you to feel a thing without associating the pain with him. She answered, now less afraid of the fact and more afraid of the day when the board would decide to stop being strange. This time, it wasn't the river. This time, a sound like tires on aggregate eased into her ear. She heard a blinker make an unnecessary music. She heard a rumble her body recognized as the mile-long freight that climbs the grade toward concrete and can be heard everywhere when clouds lay a lid over the valley. She said his name. The whisper didn't come. Instead, a voice she didn't know. Exhausted in that way, dispatchers measure with a ruler, not with pity. Ma'am, the voice said, are you the lady on the other end of this number? This thing called me and it went straight to your board. Keely did a fast thing with her hands that told the recorder to make a second copy. She said her name and her role. The man explained in the way tired men always do, with extra details they do not know are extra. He was a rail worker out past Birdsview, night shift, walking the line with a vest and a can of paint, and a patience that came from a man who had watched 3 friends leave town for no good reason. A phone lying by the ballast lit up bright white as a trout belly and slid a call to 911 before he could decide how to feel. He picked it up because of course he did. He saw the screen read Finn March because whoever the system was had a sense of humor. Where exactly are you, sir? She asked. And he told her the truth, the way only people at 2 in the morning tell you truths. Mile marker 11, point something, run outside of the line, by the old alder that looks like a witch if you give her a hat. She sent Boone with 2 men and headlamps and the desire to leave without needing to talk to anyone. They found the phone in a seam of gravel, half covered by ash from last summer's burn. No SIM, no battery, a thing not alive, and still somehow doing the work a thing does when asked correctly. The railman said he had watched a marten cross the tracks with the authority of a bishop, and that the phone had lit at his feet with no reason. Boone brought it back in an evidence bag, as if that would matter to anyone who keeps a room of labeled bags. Keely set the dead phone on the console like a votive. She stared at it 4 minutes and 40 seconds, and then turned it face down the way she had in the chapel with the roses and the smell of lilies that always go too far. She spoke into the radio to tell the volunteers to go home. She put a note in the event record that read in plain human, found object belonging to decedent, recovered at tracks near mile 11, turned over to family. The calls didn't stop. They thinned. They arrived on days when the river wore fog like a borrowed coat. They brought her directions she did not always want. It called once when she and her mother were at the storage unit with the overhead door that rolled like a prayer. Box on the right, said the whisper after the open line, and the pump hum and the small laugh had passed. Not the one with Christmas lights, other right. The box held the watch their grandfather had worn in the war, and 2 rolls of quarters, and the letter that finished a fight their mother had been carrying with a girl from high school for 30 years, without admitting it was heavy. It called once more on an evening in late July, the kind of hot, rare to that valley, when heat lies down like a dog everywhere and pants. She was off duty for once, drinking water in long draws with a slice of lime she did not deserve. The board would be in someone else's ear. Still, she felt it. The old wall phone rang, she lifted it. Nothing. Then the faintest corridor of sound, the way a tin can telephone sounds when the string is too long. She stood very still in her kitchen, in a house that still carries their father's shadow even after 2 decades, and she listened. No river, no pump. Someone whistled 3 notes she hadn't heard since they were kids on a porch with a bowl of cherries and sticky hands. The notes meant, come in, it's time. Then the line went as tenderly empty as it had ever been. People ask her sometimes when they find out what happens on the night board, whether she believes in ghosts. She says no in the way a person says no to a question that tries to make a movie out of a documentary. She believes in the way the valley holds sound and the way water teaches machines new tricks. She believes in the habits of grief, which include calling you at unreasonable hours and asking you to find objects on shelves you didn't label. She believes in the way certain names carry weight in certain counties and in the way good men hide keys in obvious places because they want the right person to find them without feeling tricked. If you listen for a moral here, you will miss the point and the point will not be angry. It will go on being a point without you. Keely goes to work, she works. She keeps the cardigan on her chair and the photos on the shelf. She answers calls from people who are alive in the cracked ways the living are alive, and she sends help, and sometimes the help is in time, and sometimes it is in time to witness the end of something. She eats her granola bar. She drinks her water. She drives home the long way if the short way tells a story too loudly. She keeps the dead phone in a drawer that sticks a little on humid days. She tells the story to exactly the right number of people and then stops. Some nights the board does the old trick and shows a number the carrier cannot account for, and a tower that should be asleep, and a location shaped like a shrug. She answers. She says the words she has said more than any words she will ever say. 911. What is your emergency? If all that comes back is a river being a river, she lets the line stay until it learns how to disconnect. If a whisper says key or box or sorry, she says the truth in the voice that has led more people back to themselves than the county will ever know. I've got you. We'll figure it out. When she passes the graveyard on her way to the early shift now and then, she rolls the window down and checks whether the air smells like cut grass and stone or like lilies someone should have watered more recently. She does not say his name out loud there because she knows better. She says it in the car when the freight rolls through the valley and makes the whole county feel like a chest resonating under a singer's hand. She says it in the basement when the pump kicks on and the house remembers last winter. She says it when her mother takes a nap in a chair with sunlight that has fallen asleep with her. And sometimes, when the hills fold the night just right and the board glows a color she cannot forget, the call connects after midnight and after the end of a song and after the last note of a life that learned to close drawers. It connects after the funeral and after the casseroles and after the number has technically stopped being anyone's. The call connects and a river breathes and a laugh leans into the wire and a word that matters knows the way to the one person who will stand still long enough to hear it and then do something small and exact with what she has heard. That is enough. That is all anyone should demand from a story that features a phone and a county and a woman who is good at being awake when most of the world is asleep and at letting go when it is time to let the line go. So, if your phone rings with a number you are certain belongs to someone who has been given over to the ground, do not panic, do not make a shrine, do not go on television. Answer, stand still. Say your name, ask for what it wants. If the only answer is a sound you know, river, pump, train, the kitchen clock arguing with the refrigerator, write down the words anyway. They will lead you to a key you were meant to find, a box you were meant to open, a third tread meant to lift. And when the line empties itself politely, as lines do, put the phone back on its hook and walk the long way to bed. Somewhere far off, a dispatcher you will never meet is saying the same sentence you just said, in the tone that holds a county steady. I've got you. We will figure it out. Then, a light goes dark. The river keeps the beat, the valley sleeps, and doesn't, and goes on.